Good morning, and please silence your electronic devices. Welcome to the January 23rd, 2022 Finance and Audit Committee meeting. I'm Commissioner Pat Kemp, and I'll be chairing the meeting today. The meeting format is a hybrid. Quorum is not physically present, but committee members are present at the HART administrative offices in Ybor City, 7th Avenue, and others are present virtually. And this morning, we'll move to public comment. Do we have any, we don't have any public comment signed up for the meeting, correct?
That is correct, but also I would like to take a roll call attendance if that is okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did miss roll call.
Committee Chair Kemp,
Here.
Committee Member Knight,
Here.
Committee Member Schisler.
Here.
That concludes roll call. Thank you, Madam.
Okay. And do we have anybody physically present or anybody present that would like to have a public comment? Okay. Seeing none, because we don't have a physical quorum present, we will not be doing approving the minute meetings or doing the election of committee officers, and we'll move straight to presentations. The first presentation is the proposed fiscal year 2024 budget calendar. Ms. Laura Izzo, Director of Financial Operations, although that doesn't look like what we have present here, is recognized to present.
And Ms. LeGrand, this first presentation I'm going to be giving is just an overall schedule of what our fiscal year 24 budget calendar looks like. So today, February 20th, we will be presenting to the HART Finance and Audit Committee our budget calendar and our options for revenue enhancements and cost reductions. On March 6th, at the board meeting, we will be doing likewise. We'll be presenting this budget calendar and our options for revenue enhancements and cost reductions. Through the months of March to May, the staff develops the Chief Executive Officer's recommended operating budget, the capital budget, and the fiscal year 24 through 28 five-year capital plan. On May 15th, we will be presenting the tentative operating budget, the capital plan, and the capital budget to the HART Finance and Audit Committee. Following that, on June 5th, that same proposed operating budget and capital plan and capital budget will be presented to the HART Board of Directors. On June 26th, a presentation will be made to the HART Finance and Audit Committee of proposed amendments to the fiscal year 23 operating and capital budget, if necessary. And then on July 1st, now July 1st is a Saturday, but that's our mandated deadline date, so more than likely this will happen before July 1st. Our proposed budget gets submitted to the governing legislative bodies, i.e. the City of Tampa, Florida, the County of Hillsborough, Florida, and the City of Temple Terrace in Florida. On July 10th, it will be presented to the Board of Directors to consider our operating and capital budget amendments for approval if necessary. This ties back to the ones that we're presenting to Finance on June 26th. Same thing on that would be action item number 1. Action item number 2 on July 10th would be for the Board of Directors to resolve to advise the property appraiser of its prior year and current year proposed millage rate, rollback rate, and the date, time, and place of a public hearing to consider the proposed millage rate and the tentative budget. On July 31st, we will be presenting to the Board of Directors the budget presentation and a discussion of the fiscal year 24 service plan. August 14th, at the Finance and Audit Committee, we will be presenting the 5-year capital plan and the fiscal year '24 capital budget. Now, in September, we don't have specified dates yet because we won't have them until we hear back from the property appraiser. But these 3 actions need to be taken because September 30th is our deadline to complete the budget. So in order of events in September, the first one will be the proposed budget will be published on HART's official website with a 2-day requirement prior to the first public hearing. From there, we will go to the first public hearing held on the proposed budget and millage. At this public hearing, the board adopts the proposed millage by resolution prior to adopting the proposed budget by resolution. And then at the last meeting in September, which is our second and final public hearing, held within 2 to 5 days after the advertisement appears in the newspaper, at this public hearing, the board adopts the final millage by resolution and adopts the final budget by resolution. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding the calendar?
Any questions or comments?
I have none.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was surprised to see this on the agenda this morning. I said, boy, we're starting early. But we're just getting the overview of the dates, yes.
And technically, if Ms. Izzo, if you go back to your first slide on the budget calendar, we really start the process, in March. So, and since, the committee definitely wants us to go through committee before we go to the board, we wanted to present it. But our budget cycle starts in March every year, so it does seem pretty quick, but definitely want to get ahead of it. So just wanted to share with you what the overall calendar of events looks like. We will be engaging with the board and the committee, especially since we're working to identify opportunities to reduce our costs and increase our revenue. So I would say this budget cycle would be one where we'd like to have a lot more active participation as we look to find these opportunities for increasing revenue and reducing costs, but specifically increasing revenue. Any guidance or support that we can get from the committee members as well as the board members would be helpful.
Great, thank you.
Okay. If that's it, then I'll move on to my second presentation, but can somebody help me get to my second presentation?
So the next presentation, the overview of the HART fiscal year 2023 budget book.
Okay, so what we have prepared is, for our fiscal year 2023, we are preparing an extensive budget book. It is still in its draft form. It should be completed by the end of the month for publication. But at this time, we just wanted to give the Finance and Audit Committee an overview of what will be in that budget book. So essentially, there's 6 sections in the budget book: the organizational overview, organizational accomplishments, the budget and reserve policies, the fiscal year 23 combined operating and capital budget, and then Section 5 is just the operating budget, and Section 6 is just the capital budget. And what I'm going to be doing here today is pulling out a highlight from each one of these sections. So for Section 1, and this was discussed at our first meeting this morning, we have our 4 goals, and I'm not going to elaborate on this further because Omar, I didn't know that he had it in his presentation. But the first goal is to be financially sustainable, following these 5 objectives. The next goal is to prioritize the customer service via these 4 objectives. Goal number 3 is to support employee success. And then goal number 4 is to enhance our community value by supporting community initiatives that align affordable housing with transit service, continued collaboration with partner transit agencies, and grow our partnership with HCC and other local area technical schools. So moving on to section 2, which is our organizational accomplishments. And there's much more data in the book. I'm just pulling out the key points and the highlights. And this is our operational statistics for our fiscal year 21 actual, our fiscal year 22 projections, and our fiscal year 23 proposed budget. Now, keep in mind, at the time we were doing the budget, this was a snapshot in time. So at the time, we were working with these fiscal year 22 projections. Omar presented earlier what our actuals were, which all are coming in better than what our projections were. So you can look for our fixed route for the 23 budget. For revenue miles, we have 8,199,395. Our hours are 662,200. And our ridership is projected at 12,000, our budget is 12,032,360. For paratransit, our revenue miles are 1,809,676. Our revenue hours are 120,620, and our ridership is 196,897. For streetcar, our revenue miles are 125,060. Our revenue hours are 23,328, and our ridership is 1,070,608. For all of HART, our budget has, for revenue miles, 10,134,131. For revenue hours, 806,148, and total ridership is 13,299,865. So moving on to section 3, which is where we have our budget and our reserve policies. This is just very top level. We've gone into this before at other meetings about what our fund balance reserves need to be. And the ones that we are holding in reserve is our self-insurance reserve, which includes the risk reserve and the medical benefit reserve. And then we have a capital matching reserve. We have a fund balance reserve, which is 3 months of working capital. And we have an undesignated fund, which is to be used for our daily operations. In total, the reserves add up to approximately $26 million. And we have, as of Friday, in our undesignated fund, in both of our Synovus bank account and our Prime bank account, approximately $31 million. Okay, so moving on to section 4 now. This is our combined operating and capital budget. And in total, it is $160,046,015. And starting at 3 o'clock on the pie chart, the federal grants with the ARP Act is $65,602,702, or 41% of our total budget for revenue. The state grants are $11,064,093, which represents 7% of total revenue. Our ad valorem, which we budget at 95% of what we project it to be, is $65,379,311, which is 41%. Our local contributions are $4,565,932, 3%. Other sources of revenue at 1.6% are $2.5,030,900. And then wrapping it up with our Fair Pass revenues, which account for 7% of our total revenue budget at $10,903,077. So now, looking at our total operating and capital expenses, again, which equal the $160,046,015, and starting on the right-hand side of the pie chart, our salaries and wages are $81,000,000 $81,479, which represents 51% of the total budget. Our operational contracts are $8,963,620, which is 6%. Parts and supplies are $5,543,691, which is 3%. Our insurance costs are $4,970,231, another 3%. Then our capital expenses, as a portion of this total budget, are $45,736,905, or 28% of the total budget. Our fuel and oil is $7,501,616, 5%, and all other expenses are $6,248,473, which is 4%. Now, this slide here is a stacked bar chart, and it shows you the trend from fiscal year 19 all the way up to our budget for fiscal year 23 of how the percentage of operating compares to the percentage of capital. In fiscal year 19, if you add those two numbers together, our total budget is $110 million, and I'm just rounding here. In fiscal year 20, it was $120 million. 21, it was $150 million. Last year's actuals came in at $171 million, and next year, and fiscal year 23's budget is $160 million, again, with operating representing 42% of that. Okay, so now, just to break out the personnel, because the salaries and wages is a big portion of the total budget, this is how our personnel is breaking out. We're budgeting for a total of 800 full-time employees. The operational full-time employees are 65% of all employees, or 526 people. Customer service is 45 employees, 5.63%. The executive is 8 staff members at 1%. HR is 12 staff members at 1.5%. Legal and general counsel is 13 full-time employees at 1.6%. Development is 30 full-time employees at 3.7%. Finance is 34 full-time employees, 4%. And then rounding it out with maintenance at 137 full-time employees at 17%. Then, just to break out our operating expenses further by category, they will total $114,309,110. You can see that the salaries and wages for the 800 people I just delineated are $58,031,166, or 51% of the total budget. Add to that the fringe at 11%, which is $12,138,796. Our healthcare costs are budgeted at 10% of the total budget at $10,911,517. Our operational contract services are 8%, which is $8,963,620. Parts and supplies, $5,543,691, 5% of total budget. Our insurance costs are $4,970,231, 4%. Administrative other is $1,350,988, 1%. Fuel and oil is $7,501,616. Administrative contract services are $1,679,453, which is 1%. Legal expenses are $1.264359, 1%. And then our utilities are less than 1% at $1,013,342. Our marketing and printing is $578,048, and there is it's less than 5%, and we didn't extend the decimals out that far. That's why it's reflected as zero. And the taxes and fees are at $362,283. So this is an interesting graph because this shows our property tax revenues and millage from fiscal year 2019 to our budget for fiscal year '23. You can see that it's going up, but just as an aside, this is not going up because we've increased our millage rate. Our millage rate has stayed the same for over 20 years at 5%. This increase in revenues is due to the growth in housing and the growth in tax assessed values. But this is with a flat millage rate at 5%, which, like I said, I went back to the year, all the way back to the year 2000. We did decrease it down to about 4.83, and I think that was in the year 2018, and then it went back up to 5, but we've never been above 5 since the year 2000. So the last section focuses solely on the capital budget. And you can see the first column, our total budget for fiscal year '23 for capital is $45,736,905. This is made up of the rolling stock slash maintenance of $22,453,710. And moving across the next 4 years, you can see it pretty much stays around the 22 million until we get to fiscal year '27, where it jumps up to 65 million, and that's based on the assumption of electric buses, which is why you see the big jump. Facilities and construction for the current year budget is $4,413,500. Of course, this jumps up in the next 3 years for the heavy maintenance facility, and it comes back down to something more normal in the 5th year at $2.181 million. Our technology for this year's budget is $14,832,388. In line with the other 4 years, which go down dramatically, the reason why we have the $14 million in this year's budget is for the AVL APC program. And then it comes down to something more normalized. Our planning studies continue at $500,000 until we get to the 5th year, where it's $4 million. Bus stops and shelters stay pretty consistent with this year's budget at $3,072,120. The arterial BRT, I think, speaks for itself. It's going to be $15 million in next year's capital plan, and then $5 million for all remaining years. Our safety and security is at $319,786, with a projected $150,000 for the next 4 years. And our maintenance and equipment is at $145,401 for this year, for a total of 5 years at $8,195,401. So what we are looking at a total 5-year capital plan of $334,062,882. And then just to show this as a comparative basis of our capital revenues and our capital expenses, our fiscal year 2022 budget compared to the '23 budget, you will see that the FHWA is going from $19,637,000 to $484 to $5,039,242. The FTA discretionary funds stay relatively the same, with this year's '23 budget being at $11,010,479. The HART General Fund goes from $8,326,000 down to $95,000 for this year's budget. The DOT goes from $7,629,000 down to $1,945,000. TICO for this year, for '23, will be at $1,371,000. Our 5339 grant last year was $4,961,000. This year, it's $8,307,000. Our 5337 grant stays pretty much the same at $3.1 million last year and $3 million for fiscal year '23. The 5307, it was $5 million last year, and it's 13.827447 in the fiscal year '23. So you can see our revenues went from 63 million last year in the 2022 budget to 45 million in the '23 budget. And of course, our revenues will always equal our expenses because we're a zero-based budget. So looking at our expenses and the change year over year, the rolling stock maintenance stays pretty much, both budgets are pretty much the same, with this year being at 22,453,710. Facilities and construction last year was at 16,300,000 because we were expecting to start on the heavy maintenance facility, I believe. So we adjusted that down to the 4.4 million for this year's budget, and then bringing it up, as I was shown on the other slide, for the next subsequent 3 years. Our technology last year was 11,435,000. This year's budget is 14,832,000. Planning studies have been reduced by 3 million, down to 500,000 for the '23 budget. Our bus stops and shelters are pretty much flat at the same $3 million. Safety and security, last year's budget was 2,373,000. This year, it's 319,000. The maintenance on the equipment last year was 1,777,000, and this year it's 145,000. Last year, we had a budget for non-revenue vehicles at 711,000, and we have no budget for that in fiscal year '23. And we also had a reserve for contingencies last year, in last year's budget at 575,000, and we don't have that same reserve this year. So, does anybody have any questions or comments?
Do we have any?
Sure, sir, I do.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mrs. A very good presentation. I appreciate it. I do have one question on the last chart, particularly with the rolling stock budget for '22 to '23. How did the actuals compare to '22? But you may not be able to answer that question off the top of your head. But I would like to know where we actually stood at the end of '22 for rolling stock acquisition. My point is that we're budgeting another 20-something million for this year coming up. Given that it's already February, well, essentially March, and the lead times, how much of that would we be able to spend/encumber before the end of the fiscal year?
Okay, so if I heard you correctly, because I accidentally hit my laptop when you were speaking, you want to know what the fiscal year-end, '22 year-end actuals were as compared to the budget, and then see where we're at 6 months into this year, be it February or March?
I think he said just rolling stock.
On the rolling stock, on that line item.
Right, we're talking $22 million. It's a big chunk. Yes, you're right. That's what I'm interested in at this moment.
Okay, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I will certainly get it to you. That does represent 50% of the total capital plan, so that's definitely a critical number we would want to analyze.
No, that's fine. I didn't expect you to have it on top of your head. Just if you could get that for me, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was my major question. Thanks.
Okay. I have a few questions. I'm just, of course, we see the variances and we see a lot less money through the variances. But when you look through the variances, some of it's capital projects, some of it's some other things. Are there any of these variances? And I imagine the rolling stock is somewhat affected by the TPO money that's going to be used for the operations and maintenance center, but then the operations and maintenance center has less money going into it, from what I can tell, next year. So is there any of these figures that we should be particularly, I understand that the fiscal cliff and the challenges we're facing and that we never have enough money, but are there any of these that we at this moment should be particularly concerned, alarmed, unanticipated, that we should really be like worried, very, very concerned about?
So, Madam Chair, that is a great question, and that's really why we're presenting the FY23 budget information, because the previous presentation talked about kicking off the calendar for FY24. So this is an opportunity for us to look at this, what's on the screen right now, our 5-year capital plan, which was put together last year, right? So every year, 1 year drops off, another year gets added, so we always have 5 years. So when we're looking, if you can put that previous slide back up, when you're looking at FY24, you see these allotments of funds associated, and this is all the capital budget, on how we want to spend the dollars. But now recognizing that we do have, limited funding, which we always knew we had limited funding, but we know that the referendum didn't pass, this is the time for us to start having some meaningful conversations about what we want to prioritize, so that we are making adjustments to the next fiscal year so that we can actually implement the plan and not just have it aspirational. Because that's what we've done in the past, right? We've had plans that were more or less aspirational, but we put them down on paper, but we knew we could not implement them. What we want to do moving forward, especially in this next cycle for the next 5 years, is put a plan together that we know or feel fairly confident that we can implement the plan, and we have to have some tough decisions, right? So we know we're a bus company primarily, so I would say, if I was giving guidance to the board, we want to prioritize making sure we can operate as a bus company. So we would need to have buses. We'd need to have everything that goes with maintaining buses. So on the capital side, we'd want to really look at how do we prioritize that. And then once we go from making sure we have the buses and the facilities required and the maintenance required, equipment rather, required to maintain those buses, then what else do we need? And we've talked about this a lot, right? The shelters, the bus stops, the access points so that our community can actually get and board and get off of our buses. So these are some of the conversations that we need to really start looking at and having an understanding of, we're going to have to skinny down on some of the things that we do, but how much, if we will, this is not a technical term, how much skinnying do we really want to be comfortable doing? And I would say from a board perspective, because you are a governing board, you provide us with policy guidance, we would look to you for some guidance on, what you would like to see us do. Of course, we will give you recommendations, but we definitely would like to hear from you on, where would you like us to prioritize? What are some of the areas that are very important to you that we focus on, and then we could come back to you with some recommendations. So to sum up, I would say definitely FY24, we want to make sure that, I would say 80 to 90% of what we put in the plan for 24 we can actually implement, recognizing that that percentage of implementation would diminish year over year as we go further out. But every year, the next year we're in, we should be committed to at least 80 to 90% being able to implement that next year's capital plan. I hope that helped to provide some guidance there.
It does some. Is there, and just if I got to like specifics, and I will, it's a lot, but let's say like we have $5 million less from FDOT. Is there, why is that?
So we did, I don't want to call it the switcheroo, but we worked with FDOT to change the way we got the dollars. So last year, we were in, I guess, the last year of using the dollars the way they were originally programmed, and now we're looking to switch those dollars to the heavy maintenance facility.
Okay.
So what you're seeing here is that switch that occurred. So next year, in the 5-year capital plan, I think Ms. Izzo talked about that as well, you'll see that there's more funding is going to be allocated toward the heavy maintenance facility in our plan for the next couple of years, because that's when we program that we would actually be able to start to utilize those dollars. So
Okay, that
they're
helps.
still there, but they weren't in
Right.
the budget for FY '23 because we weren't going to be in that
Phase
phase
of the construction.
Exactly.
Okay. And I probably have some other things like that, but but that helps me a lot to understand the budget a little better and understand some of what it means. And these are just a few picky questions, like when you go personnel by function, I can understand every category on there, but I know customer experience is a category that I see it at transit agencies across the country as both a priority, but also a category or a title, job title. And it's the only one where I don't really understand what exactly that means in terms of 45 people that are doing it. And that's not to, because I know that we have certain things that probably fit in there, which I thought was wonderful, but I was, to find that we have bus guides, and, I mean, I'm just imagining all kinds of things, but maybe for some more description in there, just because I'd like to know. I'd
No
just be
problem.
curious what that means exactly. And then if I just go back to the organizational overview, the goals there. So were these passed by the board in the past?
Yes, so these goals are the goals that are in the TDP, and they came before the board in November for board approval, but it came before the board, I would say, starting in maybe June or July, when we first started showing the board what we came up with as far as the goals and the objectives. So there was some board input, we made some, I would say, revisions, and these that are presented before you are the ones that were adopted in the TDP.
Okay.
So that's why Ms. Izzo, when she shared that, she wasn't going to go into detail, because when Mr. Alvarado did his presentation, these are the goals and the objectives. The one nuance here is that Mr. Alvarado's presentation showed the objectives for the first 5 years as well as for the last 5 years of the 10-year TDP. These reflect the first 5 years of the TDP as far as the objectives.
Okay. Okay. And I don't know if there's any other questions. If Director Knight, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask?
Yes, one was, and you went on to the next one, it was pertaining to one of the contracts that the person didn't have, SBE, it was 2 points in there. I can go back to it, but.
Was it one of the pie charts?
No, it was someone awarded a contract, up for a contract, and it didn't include SBE in the contract. And you're saying that the board, the executive said that it would encourage, but it's not in the contract. And that was a concern with me. But I'll let you continue on to this next one. Another thing too on that, couple other, but on that SBE, let me find it and I'll get back with you.
Madam Chair, may I?
Yes,
ask?
yes, go ahead.
Director Knight, are you referring to an action item or this PowerPoint on the, or this presentation on the budget book? Right, okay, so
Okay.
we can talk
So,
about that one.
right, well-
when we get to the action item.
Okay.
But the one, even on the streetcar, the operational, the section 2, operational statistics, and on the streetcar, use the same numbers from FY22 projection to the proposed budget. And I was wondering, all the other changes I was looking at, used the same one on the streetcar. I just want to know how was that?
And this is on the slide,
On this slide,
page 34?
Yes.
Okay, so you're talking about the operational statistics for the streetcar revenue miles, revenue hours, and ridership.
Right.
So the revenue miles are going to be static because we pretty much have the same distance for the streetcar. So that's why you see it's more or less the same. It's a little bit more, but, you know, it's not that much. And then for the revenue hours, that's going to be pretty much consistent as well because the streetcar hours, they start and end at the same time, and that's our built-in schedule for the entire year. So that's kind of static. It's pretty much the same. You'll see some fluctuations because we may have added an additional car because of an event, but for the most part, those two numbers are going to be pretty consistent. The one number that is different, which is definitely worth focusing on because we kept those two other areas pretty much consistent. And even though we didn't increase the revenue miles and we didn't increase the revenue hours, we did increase the ridership. So I think that's the key takeaway on this line item, that even though those other two stayed solid, we still generated and attracted more people to use our streetcar system.
Okay, thank you. And also, I'm always concerned with the, on the slide 39, section 5, the personnel by function, and I see where the 8 executives and the 1% and even the customer experience. I wanted to know, has any changes occurred in the last 30 to 60 days, 30 to 45 days? Any changes or any movement, anything changed? Because I'm always concerned about, we found out later on. And so I want to know on the executive, who's there, and even with the budget and everything, along with the customer experience, operational, any changes that we need to know about when you're putting in for this. Have you did any changes, anything coming up?
No, I have not made any changes, and these, this slide on page 39, this represents the personnel, and again, this is all information that's going to be presented to you in our FY23 budget book. So what we do in the budget book is we combine in those 6 sections that Ms. Izzo presented, we provide the board, the community, the public with the information associated with everything that went into developing the budget, where we are in the details. So that's what you see here. There's nothing that has been changed, but every year we'll do a budget book. So, you know, what Ms. Izzo was talking about in the budget calendar, you'll see in that budget calendar as we start to look at putting together the budget for FY24, that's our opportunity, again, with the guidance of the board, to see if there are opportunities for us to make some adjustments. We do know that there will be some adjustments in FY24 budget. I have presented that one of the priorities that we're focusing on as an opportunity for us to reduce our expenses is to eliminate positions that are vacant, and then those positions that are vacant and those positions that maybe someone, if they leave, if it's not an essential position, we're not going to backfill it. So that's something that we're going to do immediately, which doesn't impact, you know, necessarily folks who are sitting here, because these are positions that are vacant. No one is in those positions, but they're actually still in the budget. So we will be removing those positions from the FY24 budget, as well as any other positions if they don't get backfilled. We'll look at opportunities on a case-by-case basis to determine if they're essential positions. One caveat is, though, we're not going to eliminate vacant positions for bus operators or mechanics, and we've stated that before as well. So we'll continue to have classes, we'll continue to market to get more people to sign up for those classes, to become bus operators, mechanic techs, because going back to what we said with the 5-year capital plan, we have to prioritize, at least staff recommendation is to prioritize making sure we have buses that have operators to operate the buses, and we have technicians who can work on making sure those buses are safe for the community. So those will be the areas that we'll continue to focus on, recruiting. And those other areas, we will look at ways to consolidate some positions.
So a question again, some of those positions that's been vacant, that was already budget, what happened to the monies for those? They was already there, budget for it. We approved last time.
Right.
but it wasn't filled, and I'm gonna eliminate, well, what happened to the budget for those positions?
So those positions that were budgeted, that are vacant, still show in our budget as budgeted positions. So that just means that as we went through the cycle last year this time, we worked with the entire executive team, and they represent different business lines, and we sat with them to figure out how many employees, how many resources do you need to deliver your business? So that's how we put the budget together, which we'll be doing the same thing for FY24, which starts in a couple of weeks. And then those positions are budgeted, and then we go through the recruitment process, right? So we post them on our website. Sometimes we go to like LinkedIn and different sites to get people to come to our site to apply for the job. Sometimes we use outside firms to help us do that as well. So what we're saying is those positions are budgeted because we have the money, so that if we do attract someone and we offer them the position and they start working, we know we have the funds in the budget to pay those people. What we're saying now is any of those positions that are vacant currently, instead of us actively going out into the market to recruit for those people to come work at HART, we have looked at it on an executive team level to determine, out of those vacant positions, how many of those are we comfortable with not filling and still being able to provide the level of service that we need to provide. So that's what we've done over the last couple of weeks. We've had some workshops, we've worked internally, and we've come up with a plan to eliminate those positions from the budget. So the difference is, even though they're not filled right now, they show up in the budget. Once we take them out of the budget, that pie chart that showed, I think, 51% of the budget was going to wages and salaries, that number will come down because we'll pull those positions out of the budget.
Thank you.
And just keep in mind that what I'm presenting here is the budget, which is a snapshot. In answer to your question, for these positions that were originally budgeted and not been filled and probably won't be filled, that would be, which I don't have those numbers prepared now, where I'm doing a variance report of our actuals to our projected budget. And in that case, we'll probably see, come the end of the year, a favorable variance in the salary and the fringe benefits line. Any other questions from anybody?
Okay,
Well,
If I could offer one more comment?
go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is a very good presentation, but everybody's got to remember that the 2023 budget is already 6 months old, those numbers, as well as the 2022 budget are 18 months old. So this is a snapshot of what was the thought process at that point in time. So therefore, there are changes that have been happening, and the actuals are going to be significantly different or somewhat different than what the budgets were at that point in time. And as far as the headcount adjustments that need to be made, that's the purpose of them going through the reevaluation and re-justifying each of these open positions going forward, so that we can make any adjustments that are necessary to help bridge that gap that we're racing towards. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, I think we can move on to the committee action items.
thank you, everybody.
Next on the agenda are committee action items for review by the committee and consensus for approval by the full board of directors. Item 6A is for the committee to form a consensus to the HART Board of Directors to authorize the Chief Executive Officer to award a 3-year contract with a 2-year, 1-year options to Commercial Risk Management, Inc. for third-party administrator for automobile and general liability claims expense and workers' compensation claims services in a not-to-exceed amount of $1,253,262. In your package, you have a write-up with a proposed resolution in support of the item. Do committee members have any comments or questions for staff at this time?
Question? And this just,
I have none.
Okay.
We don't need a motion because we can't have a motion, but we can move by consensus since we don't have a quorum in person. So are there any objections to recommend HART Board of Directors authorize the Chief Executive Officer to award a 3-year contract with a 2-year options to Commercial Risk Management, Inc. for third-party administrators, there's a lot to read, for automobile and general liability claims expense and workers' compensation claims services in a not-to-exceed amount of $1,253,262, and advance this item to the full HART Board of Directors at the next regular board meeting. If not.
No objection.
Okay, so. if not-
Committee chair, yeah, Director
Okay,
Knight.
so you support it as well?
No, I had a question.
Oh, okay.
This is what I was talking about. It had in there. where the
I'm sorry, I thought that when you were making a motion before.
No.
Okay, that's what I heard, sorry.
My concern with the DBE and the SBE component in there is saying that would recommend, but it's not part of it. And going to the full board, which we can't vote on anyway, I felt that that should be two things that need to be in that, should have been in that contract. We always talk on that, and by not having it in there and just leave it up to the contractor, I don't agree with that.
Do we have a response to that? Okay, Ms. LeGrand?
Yes, Ms. Zickerfoos, if you mind. So just to respond, what we have in the backup information says that this contract did not contain a DBE goal or small business set-aside requirement. However, HART did encourage the primes to provide subcontractor opportunities for DBEs. And then it also goes into the detail that 6 DBEs were notified of the opportunity, and 4 DBEs and 2 SBEs downloaded the opportunity. 2 DBEs actually submitted a proposal. So there wasn't a goal or a set-aside, but we did actively recruit, or I shouldn't say recruit, we actively engage with our DBE and SBE community. We sent out the notice to them, and as we stated, 2 DBEs actually submitted a proposal for this specific opportunity. Even though there wasn't a set-aside or a goal, we still made sure we made every effort to make sure it got into that community's purview. But I'll let Ms. Zickerfoos, the Director of Procurement, provide any other responses.
Yeah, you summed it up. That's correct. We did receive 2 DBE proposals.
But let's say, such as the Lagaceta, we talked before about Lagaceta, Florida Center, some of the local ones that can have, that the people have an opportunity to look in. Did you go to any of them?
The newspaper publications?
Yeah, the publication, yes.
We post it on our website, and we send it out to everybody that we can find that can do it, and everyone that's registered, a registered vendor.
So for sure that we said that in the future, when it come to things like this, that the Lagaceta and the Florida Center specifically would be allowed to publish it. And I don't think that happened.
I would have to check with staff, Director Knight, to see if we advertise the RFP opportunity in La Gaceta and other publications.
Yeah, we'll have
And the
to check the
Sentinel as
publication
well.
dates, but currently, we're not advertising in the papers. We advertise on Demand Star, we advertise on our website, and we advertise on Bonfire.
So what I'm hearing is that there is a request that we advertise in La Gaceta, the Sentinel, and other publications. So we need to ensure that we do that, even if it's just a notice to let those, through those periodicals, let the community know that the RFP is posted on the sites that you just mentioned. At a minimum, we should be able to do that as well. So we'll work on making sure that happens, Director Knight, and what we can do is report back once we have that set up so that Director Knight, you can look in those papers and ensure that they're actually being posted.
Right.
And I appreciate that, but I'm not saying anything that hadn't been discussed before, and it should have already been. So thank you for looking at that. But as far as moving forward, we can't vote or whatever, I don't recommend until, like some of the things I'm talking about, can go to the board or whatever, but no, I didn't make a motion to move forward.
Okay. Well, we can't make any motions at this meeting anyway, because we don't have a quorum physically present, but apparently we don't have a consensus either.
If you don't have a consensus, then it would just need to roll over to the next Finance Committee meeting, because you can't take an action to put it on the agenda for the full board. Is there any time sensitivity to this so that we can at
So-
least?
May I pose a question? So I just want to make sure I have some clarity here. The concern is that this RFP was not posted in La Caseta and the Sentinel, which Director Knight has asked for us to do this in the past. So even if we bring it back to committee next month, it will still be the same situation. So my question is the ask that we re-solicit this and then post it in La Caseta and the Sentinel before we make an award? Because if that is what the request is, we probably need to have a different type of conversation. I would say, in this case specifically, and not diminishing the request because it was requested, we did go and engage with the DBE community. I know that Ms. Ashley and Ms. Walker, Linda Walker, have been working closely with that community. So we made sure, even though we didn't post it in the paper, which we take responsibility for, we made sure that the community knew, the DBE and SBE community knew that this procurement was available. It got in the hands of several, I think 6 firms actually were notified of the opportunity. And when we say they're notified, we do have the qualification database. So we know which DBE firms, and just to back up a little bit, in order for you to be identified as a certified DBE, you have to go through the process, and we have you in a database, and we know which classification of opportunities you qualify for. So Ms. Ashley and Ms. Linda, they went through that process. They identified 6 DBE firms that were already pre-qualified. They were notified of the opportunities. 4 of them downloaded the opportunity, and 2 of them actually submitted a proposal. So based on us understanding who's registered in our database and reaching out to them directly, we know that we went and did our due diligence to ensure that we could have more competition. I would say in this specific case, even if we posted it in La Gaceta and the Sentinel, if someone did apply but they were not pre-registered, they would not be qualified to go after it. So a part of the DBE process is you have to be pre-qualified to be able to compete for the work that HART or the county puts out. So I would say we did do our due diligence to ensure that those who are pre-qualified knew about this opportunity. We can continue to post it in the paper so that others who are interested will go through the process to be qualified, but we always will directly engage with those who are in our database to let them know that the opportunity is made available. So I just thought it was important to share that, because if we push it back to the next meeting, this situation will not change, and we'd still be pretty much in the same position. So just want some guidance on how you'd like us to proceed.
I mean, I was wondering about the same thing. I'm sorry. Go.
If you have their due diligence and, along with the staff, that my main concern is, you didn't go around what should be.
So with that, then, Director Nye, are you in consensus with moving this along at this time?
Yeah, have opportunity at that time, any other information, when they get to the board or whatever, that we gonna make sure that, I'll be doing some checking and bring up some questions at the meeting.
Okay. Okay. I also with this, at some time, maybe we could understand a little bit more about how you workshop to get what you do to reach out to get people registered, since that's an issue here, and not to prolong this, but how many other non-DBE applicants were there?
Do I have that information here? I know we received 6 proposals, but we use Bonfire, which is the same database that the county uses, and there are multiple public organizations that use Bonfire. And so we have access to not only those vendors who are registered with HART, but also that are registered with the county and other organizations. As far as doing a workshop, we haven't done one for a while. We have in the past, but we haven't done a workshop to encourage folks to register with HART. But like I said, they don't have to be registered with HART.
So may I?
Sure.
So we do have workshops every year for DBEs to participate and get registered with HART. I'm going to say probably it was in October when we did the last one, October and November. They were WebEx meetings, so we send out invitations, we open it up to the community, we share with them the process for becoming certified with HART. You can get certified through, I want to say it's the county, and I don't know if Ms. Ashley or Ms. Walker are in the office today, but if they are, someone can check and see if maybe they can come and provide some responses. But I know you can be certified with the county does certification, and the city of Tampa does some of the certifications, so we coordinate with them. And
That
then
makes sense.
Yeah, and then we explain to the vendors what the process is to become certified. In a lot of cases, what happens is you might have your own small business, but you haven't gone through the certification process, so you have to do that in order to qualify. And then there's a nuance between being a DBE and an SBE, so we go over that as well in the presentation. Since my tenure here, I've participated in 2 of our workshops, so I know we do them on an annual basis. And then we also, the team also goes out to venues in the community to do one-on-ones and help people set up. So I don't know, was staff able to see if either Ms. Walker or Ashley were in the office today? Okay, I think Angela's going to go check. All right.
Okay. And we, yes.
And something I just, for y'all in your consideration, since these items don't have an actual motion, but will, and this is for all of them, but we'll just have to move forward on consensus. It's my recommendation that they do not go on the consent agenda. So if there are additional questions you want to ask, they'll go as a regular agenda item. So those questions can be asked at that point in time, and that may allow additional conversation, such as the discussion that Mr. Knight is raising.
Okay. And I will move now, because it looks like we have consensus to put this on the next agenda. But I'm going to move to the next item, which is 6B. And I do intend to, we'll take questions, but I'll read it once for the record. And I'll just, what we'll be trying to determine after the presentation or after questions, if there are any objections, to recommend HART Board of Directors authorize staff to proceed with solicitations for procurement for a provider of leased uniforms, remanufactured Allison transmissions, banking, merchant, and P-card services, and regional, state, and federal legislative services, and advance this item to the full HART Board of Directors at the next regular board meeting. So those are a whole lot of putting out RFPs or proceed with solicitations for procurement. So you don't have any presentation, correct?
There is no presentation, but we can answer every question.
Sure.
Yes.
Are there questions with regards to this item?
I have none. We're just asking for solicitations.
That is correct. So in this item, we're looking, and you may recall, I'm going to say it was probably back in September or so, that we got approval of the committee to batch our solicitations so that we could try to be 6 months ahead of when the contracts expired, because the procurement
That's a
process
good
at a
thing.
minimum takes 3 months. And then we wanted to make sure we had enough time to bring it to the committee, have conversations. So these 4 items are set to expire in the next 6 months. And we wanted to bring them before you so that we can have conversations. So as you mentioned, Chair Kemp, we have 4 different solicitations. These are all current solicitations. None of these are new, but we just want to get ahead of the procurement process so we can resolicit before the current contracts expire. So the first one is for leased uniforms, and these are leased uniforms that are primarily for the maintenance staff. Their uniforms are leased because they go back, they get cleaned, they have oil and other things on them. So we send them back to the leaser, we're the leaser, I guess, for them to clean the uniforms, provide them back. So this is a contract for those services. Mr. Drainville is here. If you have any specific questions on our uniform leasing, how it's worked over the last several years, he can provide you an update on that one. The next one is a procurement of remanufactured transmissions. Again, we have a current contract. We're looking to resolicit before this one ends, and these are for transmissions for our buses and getting a contract for that. The third one is for our banking, merchant, and P-card services. So these are banking services. Again, we have a contract now that expires. We want to resolicit before it expires. And the last one is for our procurement of regional, state, and federal legislative services. So earlier at the strategic planning session, we had a presentation from our current vendor who provides those services. Their contract expires. We're looking to resolicit so we can re-procure before their current contract expires. So that's what we're doing on all of them.
And all this is good. I like the consolidation. The only thing I would do is honestly break out the regional, state, and federal legislative services, since that's such a, in the future, I would just make that a separate item from the rest, since that's one of those rare items, along with the auditor, that and our legal counsel, that we kind of treat differently than everything else, because it's a final decision by the board, not just like a typical, procurement. So I'll just, for the record, but I'm fine with consensus on this, and Director Schisler says that he is as well, so.
And again, that's what my concern was with these here. Why not have them individualized? An individual, such as you have a concern with the last one. I feel that if you take it to the board, our next meeting, have an individual, we can vote.
Okay.
That's the only way I'll agree to go forward with it, that when it comes at the meeting, that it be individualized.
That's not a problem. We followed, we had gotten the opposite guidance last time, that we had so many individual ones on the agenda. The ask was if they were for solicitation, to just bundle them together, but when it transitioned to award, to separate them. But if
Right.
you'd like us to go back to the old way of listing them all individually, we can do that as well.
It's all fine. For me, it's all fine, but I
Okay.
just think that one is kind of one to take notice of, because it's usually a bigger deal.
Okay, so, of course, this is the first time we're re-procuring
Right.
this since I've been here, so I just wanted a little bit of clarity. Are we saying that the procurement for regional, state, and federal legislative services is one where we set up an ad hoc committee and the board does that, or is that?
It's a final decision of the board, rather, I mean, they all are, but the
Yeah.
board makes the board, the way I have been here in the past, when it's been, for instance, the auditing, the legislative, or the legal, it's been us rating, deciding, and making, I don't know if it's a set process, but I know that there was quite a bit of discussion with the 3 teams making presentations that had applied in the past. Maybe Ms. Mendel could.
Will work.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, I was not here when you did these solicitations in the past. Mr. Smith was. That being said, you are correct, as it relates to the legal, legislative, and audit, that is specifically driven by the board versus the internal process. I don't, for this purpose, it doesn't matter. I mean, whether, this is just simply
Right.
agreeing to proceed forward. But when you get into that process, I'm sure the folks who do the procurement side of this would know that they have to be separated. But I think for these purposes, whether or not you want to see this in one action or not, the consensus to move it forward, the consensus can have the caveat, just separate them out on the agenda, and I think that's sufficient
Right.
to get us to the next level on this.
Right.
So,
last
so what I, oh, sorry.
Okay, last question.
If the-
On that one about the state, federal, legislative, should that fall under us or the state, the legislative committee?
Well, I would have to defer to procurement as to how they've done this in the past. It's just that those three particular items, instead of going through a traditional internal procurement process, actually has rating and review by the board, and they actually, kind of like what you did with the audit, where you actually rank, that's something that, those are the three per year policies, gets ranked through the board versus ranked through internal committee. I'm certain the ones that have done this for a long time know how to set that up and have done that in the past. I haven't been here for those. That being said, this is simply just saying, we're going to move forward with these solicitations. So that doesn't take away that process that's existing.
And what we'll commit to doing.
If I may,
Sure, sorry, I'm speaking on your behalf.
Go ahead.
yeah, I'm sorry. I have about a 2-second delay. Anyway, when we did the last legislative and state and federal contract, that was done through the Strategic Planning Committee because it was my first opportunity to be on that committee 3 years ago. I think it was 3 years ago. So just as the audit contract is relegated to the Finance and Audit Committee as it was last year, we relegated that one to the strategic planning. We're not there yet. All we're doing is getting board permission to say, let's go ahead and move forward with the solicitation. And at that point, it would be assigned to the strategic planning committee for their blessing, or whatever you want to put it, for their approval so that it can come back to the full board for a final ratification. Thank you.
Okay. So, and at this time, we have some consensus on this, so we'll move on to the next item. And again, I'm just going to go through the second statement. Are there any objections? And this is what we're going to be looking at for consensus. Are there any objections to recommend HART Board of Directors authorize the Chief Executive Officer to award a 3-year contract for paratransit, demand response, and flex computer-aided dispatch automatic vehicle location, CAT-AVL, and scheduling intelligent transportation design, and advance this item to the full Board of Directors at the next regular board meeting? And to award a 3-year contract, and is it, and scheduling, fixed transportation?
May I?
Yes,
provide some
please,
feedback? Okay.
clarify.
So this one already came through the committee for approval to solicit, and then it went to the full board, and the full board approved the solicitation for the CAT-AVL for our paratransit services, demand response. So this is so that we'll have real-time information. The bus operators will have real-time information. The community will have real-time information to see where the vehicles are. Also provide the opportunity to book your trips in advance using technology. So this was already approved for solicitation. Now we're coming back to award the contract. So we want approval to award since we've gone through the solicitation process.
So, and when you come back, maybe because I'm reading this now. So do you have a particular vendor to award it to?
That is correct.
And that vendor's not listed here?
No, because we are finalizing, pencil sharpening the final negotiation, and we'll have that vendor's name before the board.
Okay,
meeting.
that's what confused me about
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
I
but we
was
want
like
to-
looking at it saying, what are we doing here? I don't have a name here.
So the name will be in the board packet. We
Okay.
just wanted to let you know that we're prepared to award, and we'd like to move forward. And then once that vendor's name will be in the board packet for the board to vote on, then we'll be able to, for the May markup, have Mr. Alvarado, if there's anything you want to add, but for the May markup, we'll be able to implement this new CAD AVL system to launch some of those changes that we showed in the system markup, like the flex and all of that, will use this technology.
Okay, okay. Okay, and are there any questions with
Well-
regards to this?
I have a little bit of a concern with this in that the process was supposed to allow the committee to kick the ball around a little bit and make sure that we flushed everything out before we made a recommendation to the full board. Not having this information at this point will prevent us from actually doing that. So I don't want to hold up. How sensitive is timeline for this? I realize we got a March 5th or 6th rollout. Was this planned on any of that or predicated on any of that?
So our rollout is in May, so we pushed it back from March to May. So what we're looking to do is, if this committee is open to it, is to have the full discussion of this award at the board meeting, but we wanted to get permission from the committee to allow this one to go to the full board meeting for conversation. All the details as far as, what is going to be procured, the dollar amount of the funding for the project, all of that is here. None of that will change with the negotiations. We just needed to, with the timing of their responses, getting back to a couple of open questions, we just did not feel comfortable putting their name in until we got the final paperwork. But none of the financial implications will be impacted by this final, I would say, signature on the line. Ms. Zickerfus, if there's anything additional you want to share, but we definitely will have all of the information before the board meeting. We just wanted to get approval to bring it and have the full conversation there. And if the committee is open to that, what that will afford us the opportunity is to fully vet it in front of the entire board. And then if the entire board is not willing to approve the award, then we'll go back, to the drawing board. But that's what we were looking to do.
Okay, so you're doing.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, if we're trying to acknowledging that we are circumventing the process and it could potentially get kicked back to the committee, then I'm okay with moving it forward at this point, knowing that it could come back to the committee for further review.
Yes, if you look at the last page, it says that under next steps, it says present the recommendations by this committee to the full board of directors at the March 6th regular board meeting, and upon approval, we'll execute the contract with Commercial Risk Management Incorporated. So the objective is to get approval from this committee to have the conversation at the full board, and then at the full board, have the full board make the approval to award.
I do feel uncomfortable with this. I'll just say, and I'm just wondering, because you said you pushed it back to May, just wondering if it could come with the name to the committee next month. What would that do?
I agree.
We could do that. I mean, we can come back, and if it pushes back anything, it'll just be pushed back. I mean, if it takes a little longer for the technology to be uploaded on vehicles, that's fine. The customers will just have a delay, and then eventually it'll be back in play. So we're definitely, open to whichever. Are we comfortable with sharing any information, or you're uncomfortable, Ms. Zickerfus, at this time?
I will say that negotiations are are drawing to the end. And I will say that we received 4 proposals. We had one clear technical proposal that rose to the top, and that one also was the lowest price. And like I said, negotiations are winding down, so I think that, like was said before, we'll definitely have that information to go to the board in the board write-up and can be discussed then, or we can bring it back to the next committee.
I just wondered, I mean, I know Director Schizler said, as an option, we could then bring it back to committee. The only thing is, that would be much longer, I would think, if you didn't approve it or said, I want it to go back to committee. I'll just say, I just am a little queasy about this, just in terms of precedent and, that. I guess and I don't even know what this contract is, what kind of, what we're talking about in terms of dollars. But I guess,
Can you share, Ms. Zickafoose, what we're talking about in terms of
Yeah.
dollars? Because that's in there already. That's already baked in.
Yeah, it's $1,193,918.
okay, and that's is that like a 3-year?
A 3-year,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, which is not to me, if it was, I was worried about it being a much bigger contract than that, actually. And so I just had no idea about the, so I feel more comfortable with that. I just would, for me, I just don't want to do something that I would regret later in terms of looking at it. And I don't want to do anything in terms of us not being diligent about what we need to be doing. But I think with a contract of that size, I feel more comfortable moving that forward to the board for, approval. And I know Director Schizler said that he already did. Director Knight,
Well, there's too many questions. As far as I'm concerned, I feel that we should bring it, do the things we need to do for the next committee meeting. If it's, got the name, got everything, we'll do it then.
Okay.
I don't feel like moving forward. It's too much.
Okay. So what we'll do is we will take this back through the process, and we will put it on the agenda for March committee, and then it will go to April board, and then what we'll do
we
is-
don't have a meeting in March.
We don't have a committee meeting?
So you don't, I'm sorry, I'm just trying, okay. The next meeting, that's right, because we're doing this for March. I'm sorry, I just lost a month
Right.
here. Okay.
Am I
So it will be
the
for
wrong
April.
month?
You're correct.
Yeah, we're in February right now.
Right.
So we're going to do the March board meeting. We're not going to present it. We'll bring it back to the March committee. And then at the April board meeting, hopefully the board approves. And what we'll also do is come up with a schedule of when the technology will be available when we launch the, we may need to change the date for our, we will get back to you and figure out how we implement the new Flex system without the technology. But we have a very creative team, and we'll figure something out.
I can see Mr. Alvarez is looking forward to the
He's
challenge.
looking for his creativity hat. He's putting on his creativity hat
Okay.
right now. That's what's going on.
Okay. And with that procurement monitoring, Ms. LeGrand, the sole source awards and deviations.
Yes, so for sole source award, you'll see that there was one new item added for transmission Eco-Life for $15,000 in February, and that's the only thing that was added to our sole source report. And then the second report we have after that are the task orders. So you'll also see that for this last cycle, we did not, we haven't added anything new for our on-calls since the last meeting. So those numbers are still the same. We haven't added anything there.
Okay. And any questions? Finally, the task order contracts monitoring to date.
Right, and then the last one on your last page, task order B for FY '23, that's the one for BTI, bus, basic transit infrastructure. And you'll see that 1.5, we did work with Flores Construction to install some bus stop shelters and landing pads. But again, that's the only thing that was added. That was for $34,000, and we still have $4.6 million remaining under that contract.
Great. Any old business? New business? We stand adjourned.
Okay, thank you.